Hello, we're live. Today is Friday the 13th, but you're too smart to be superstitious. Welcome to Build Up Dietitians Facebook Live. My name is Barb Mayfield, and I've been invited to spend the next 30 minutes with you as editor of the upcoming publication from the Academy, Communicating Nutrition, the Authoritative Guide. My goal today is to inspire you to not just build your skills as the nutrition expert, but to build your expertise in communication as well. We are up against many self-proclaimed experts who might have greater influence than we do, partly due to potentially their more persuasive communication skills. Think of the impact that we could have as a profession when we were not only nutrition experts, but communication experts as well. The Academy recognized that nutrition communication needed to be a priority as they heard from more and more educators and practitioners that they needed a resource to build their skills in this really important, critical area. It hadn't been since the 1990s when Communicating as Professionals, how many of you have this old book? It went out of print in the early 2000s. And not for the last 2 decades have we had something to take its place. And so, why did they ask me? I'll bet you didn't know who I was until you tuned in today, unless you were a former student of mine. Let me tell you a little bit about my background, and as I share my background, I hope that it inspires you to recognize that the doors that might be opening for you in your profession could lead to amazing opportunities like this one that I've had. So I attended Purdue University. I was a student back in the 70s, and I majored in both foods and nutrition and business and in dietetics. And although minoring in communication is an option, I took the number of courses that would qualify as a minor. I went on to get graduate work at Cornell University, and again, I majored in human nutrition, but I minored in communication. And I did research in the area of nutrition education. I have always been very interested in how can we communicate and educate in an excellent way, in an effective way that really makes an impact. My first position after getting my master's and getting my RD was to actually open a private practice. And if you want to hear more about that story, you can listen to a Facebook Live recording that I did with Registered Dietitian Approved a couple of months ago. It's a very fun story. Very unconventional in the early 1980s. And I also mentioned in that Facebook Live that I've never worked in a clinical setting. Again, very unconventional. But no matter our practice setting, we can be communicators. So in addition to doing a private practice, I also worked in long-term care, and I also worked in the WIC program. Raise your hand if you're a WIC dietitian. I actually spent part-time or full-time 20 years with the WIC program. I love the area of public health. What a wonderful place for us to communicate good nutrition. I did a number of projects with WIC that led me to doing lots of speaking across the country about primarily nutrition education for children. And because of that experience and my background in communicating and nutrition education, I was invited by my former department at Purdue to fill what was going to be an upcoming vacancy in the nutrition communication course that had been my favorite. Would I consider coming back to teach? So in 1999, I said yes. And so from 2000 to 2016, I taught in the Department of Nutrition Science, formerly Foods and Nutrition. And not only did I teach nutrition communication, but a variety of other courses as well. During the time that I was teaching, I did a variety of projects that helped create nutrition education resources, and I also wrote a textbook. In writing that textbook, this one right here, Nutrition for Everyone, one of the reviewers was Roberta Dife. And Roberta has served as an author for the Academy for a long time. You might be familiar with her Complete Food and Nutrition Guide. And when the Academy started hearing these pleas for we need information about nutrition communication, and they were searching for who could lead the way in creating a book like this, Roberta suggested my name. So if you think about the people that know about your work, you may not be very famous, but when you do good work and you contribute, it pays off. Well, when I had been writing this other textbook, I had said to way too many people that I would never write another textbook. You know why? It is hard work. But when the Academy approached me just a few months after I had retired from teaching at Purdue, would I consider working on this project? Oh boy, I decided I needed to eat my words because nutrition communication was my passion. I was going to be able to create a resource that would have been invaluable while I was teaching. I could leave a legacy for future educators and for my entire profession because I knew that the need was great. So I worked with the Academy to create this amazing book. It's soon to be published. I hope within a month it goes to print and that later this spring you can hold your very own copy or access your ebook on your computer. We did an extensive needs assessment to determine what needed to be in this book, which is one of the main principles that we teach in this book and I taught in my course. And we learned what needed to be in it. And so the book contains 42 chapters as well as 8 section openers that covers so many valuable topics. And many of the topics that we cover in the book aren't covered anywhere else. We have chapters on things like how to facilitate a meeting and be a moderator, or how to do a Q&A. How often do you see a chapter written about those kinds of topics? You will be able to learn so many valuable skills. It's written in a very practical way. And I'm not the only author. That's one of the things that I'm proudest about this book. We received so much input as we were doing the needs assessment and so much interest that when we put out an invitation, who would like to help contribute, we had literally dozens of people say, pick me. And so we had 57 authors work on all those chapters. Some chapters had one author, some chapters had 4 or 5, many had 2. The amount of expertise that went into this book is just phenomenal. I invite you to learn more about the book by going to my website, nutritioncommunicator.com. You can download a table of contents, you can look at a sample chapter, you can keep up with when the publication will be ready and available. So what can you learn from this book? And is it for you as a practicing dietitian as well as students that are going to become dietitians? It is absolutely for everyone. For one thing, most people who are RDNs today did not have a nutrition communication course like I took as a student or I taught later as a faculty member. We learned in our needs assessment that only 20% of academic units have that type of a course. That doesn't mean that you weren't given any of those proficiencies, but wow, there's a big gap in how we are able to teach nutrition communication. We hope that this book helps to fill that gap. However, let's say you studied 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Well, they certainly didn't have blogging. We have a chapter on that. We didn't have social media. We have a chapter on that. The way that we produce videos is totally different. The use of food photography, all of these things have chapters. Or maybe you never learned or practiced how to do a food demo, but now you have the opportunity to do that. We have a chapter on that. It's super exciting to be able to share that content with you. We also have some hugely fundamental chapters that lay the groundwork that help you to do that excellent communication before you get to the chapters on media work or food demos. We lay the foundation with communication theory and fundamental principles. We help you realize that communication is a relational activity. It's not just delivering messages. It's knowing your audience. It's hearing what they need. It's meeting those needs. It's receiving feedback. It's a relationship. That's a fundamental principle that we cover. How do we connect with our audiences? And that's something that RDNs can be so good at. We can understand people, we can understand their pain points, and we know the subject matter in and out. So as we learn how to communicate more effectively, we can get those messages written in ways that resonate with our audiences, using words they understand, putting it in the context of their daily lives. That's something that those other so-called experts that think they want to sell something to our audiences, they don't have those skills. We have an entire section on how to be evidence-based. That's one of the fundamental things that we talk about in our profession, is basing what we say on the science. And yet it's hard sometimes to know how to identify what is something that's credible. How do you access those scientific studies? How do you interpret them? How do you translate them for an audience? All of that subject matter is covered in this book, chapter after chapter. We have about 6 chapters, I think, in that section. It also includes ethics on nutrition communication, how to avoid plagiarism, and how to cite your sources. Very practical information, important for students, but also important for us as practitioners. One of the sections that I also believe is fundamental before you start presenting or communicating is an entire section on how to craft a message that's audience focused. How do you understand your audience? How do you know who they are? How do you do a needs assessment? How do you understand how behavior change theories are instrumental in explaining how people behave in certain ways, as well as encouraging change in the direction that we want them to take. We have a wonderful chapter on culture. We have a chapter on reaching people of different ages, from young children to senior citizens, and how do the generations that we're in, or the age groups that we're in, the life cycle that we're in, how does that impact what we're interested in, what we need to know, how we're going to receive information? Very important, very helpful. Entire section on how to develop presentations. So many people are afraid of how to present, how to put together a presentation, how to involve an audience in a presentation. All of those things are very well laid out and explained and given practical tips and checklists. I love also that lots of personal stories from the authors are incorporated into the chapters so that you see a real life example of how something worked out. We talk about things like the logistics of running some kind of an event or a presentation, and if you've done any of those things, you know how often things can go wrong. And delightful story from a former student of a day of disasters and how she was able to deal with each one and what she learned from it. And we can learn so much from other people's mistakes. And there's just so much valuable information in this book, and so many ways that you can become a skilled communicator. So I hope this hasn't sounded like an infomercial for the book, because this is just a wonderful gift that your Academy has created for you. The price point is amazing. It's under $80 for members, and it's 650 pages. I dare you to find a book that gives you that kind of value, that kind of information for that price. It needs to be on your bookshelf. So if you want to look for the book, I just saw the question. This is what it's going to look like. It is not in print yet. As soon as it goes into print, it will be available on eatright.org for pre-ordering. Until then, I encourage you to go to my website, nutritioncommunicator.com. There you can find out all kinds of information about the book, more information about it, and also just follow me on Facebook is Nutrition Communicator. Link with me on LinkedIn at Barb Mayfield. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm Nutrition Communicator. On Twitter, I'm N Communicator. They don't allow as many letters. And I am definitely always talking about the progress on publication, when it will be available, and as soon as it is ready for pre-order or ordering, I will certainly let you know. If you happen to be an educator, you can also, at the website, there's a link for signing up to get your preview version of the book when that's available, so that you can consider adopting it for a course. And we've had lots of educators signing up for that. And the other thing that I'm working on right now that I'm done proofreading the book and writing and revising, is what we call ancillary materials. And those are materials for the educators who adopt the book for their class to have ideas for how to implement it, activities, assignments, grading rubrics, discussion questions, all kinds of things. And I'm also soliciting for ideas from many other educators across the country. I was just at an NDEP meeting. In fact, it's the only NDEP meeting that's going to be able to take place in person this year, and collected lots of names of people who are interested in contributing to that resource. And so it won't be essential for an educator to have a dedicated course. They will be able to implement this book all throughout the curriculum. We have a lot of people who do supervised practice. They're internship directors that are very interested in getting this resource so that their students will be able to have the background they need in order to do presentations and other things that are required throughout their rotations. We also have several programs that are developing graduate programs, and they're looking at this book for a dedicated nutrition communication course at the graduate level. So we're super excited about how well it will be used. I had a question about, you were at our Build Up meetup at FNCE, right? Yes, I was. So, and that was great to see folks at that event. And any other questions that you have for me, please fill them in. I've put my glasses on so I'd be able to read what your concerns are. One of the things that I thought I might talk about today is one of the things that we can do so well as RDNs is to put our information into the context of what people are dealing with. So as we think about what we're all experiencing right now, this coronavirus crisis that is affecting us at all kinds of levels, certainly in healthcare. My heart goes out to you that need to walk through hospital doors every day and help feed patients, and potentially an influx of patients that you may or may not be prepared for. We can help people understand things like the importance of washing your hands. Think about the impact that having really stringent infection control procedures will have on not only preventing the spread of this very contagious illness, but also other things. It could potentially have positive ramifications from the standpoint of foodborne illness. I wouldn't be at all surprised if 5 years from now we say, do you remember when we had that coronavirus crisis and everyone started to wash their hands so much more faithfully? And we saw our incidence of foodborne illness crash, even though we had this spread of something else very serious. What could we learn from that? Another maybe benefit of what's taking place is that people are going to be staying home and they're going to need our help with cooking family meals and knowing how to use stable, shelf-stable foods and how to be creative in menu planning, how to think about making grocery lists that will provide them with food for 1 or 2 weeks. Those are skills that we have and that we can communicate to the publics that we serve. How can we help food insecure people in our communities? So many things that we can do during this particular time that we're all experiencing that we are so equipped for. Let's see, it looks like if someone has real fears about public speaking, what do you think about Toastmasters? Oh, I love that you brought that up. So I've been a Toastmaster for almost 20 years, and I joined Toastmasters maybe within about a year of starting to teach at Purdue, because one of the things that Toastmasters does so well is it has a real emphasis on evaluation. And one of the things that I needed to do with my students was evaluate them as presenters and as communicators. And how could I do that in a productive, affirming, effective way? And so by going to Toastmasters and going through the materials that they had and evaluating each other, half of a Toastmasters meeting is evaluating the first half of it. You have speakers, you have table topics, etc. And you have assignments as a speaker, but you also might have an assignment at another meeting as the evaluator of that speaker. And I think it has such a wonderful method, and Toastmasters is everywhere. It doesn't matter where you're listening to me around the world. There is probably a Toastmasters club near you. I forget what the total number is, but it's in the hundreds of thousands of Toastmasters club. In the community near where I live, I think we have 7 clubs. And the other thing that I like to be able to bring up about Toastmasters, it's such a good example of how you learn to communicate. You do not learn to communicate by simply reading a book. No, you don't. You learn to communicate by putting it into practice. And Toastmasters is an amazing place to do that. It's supportive. The clubs are going to vary greatly in the expertise in speaking within them, but the one thing that they share is it's an opportunity to practice and it's a supportive environment. That group of people that you are speaking to are encouraging and supportive and want you to get better. It's a great place to get rid of filler words because they count the ums that people say in a meeting. I can't say enough good things about it. It's not perfect, but if you need to build your public speaking skills, it's very affordable. It's everywhere. There's probably a club that meets at a time that would work for you. I definitely encourage you to pursue it. And we talk about that in the book. We refer to Toastmasters 2 or 3 times as a resource. So thank you for that question. Are there other questions? Thoughts, fears? What are some of the things? Please feel free to stick in a comment. What are some of the things that you do in communication related to nutrition that you find challenging or that you would hope that the book addresses? Any thoughts on that? Some of the things that are in the book that I think are very noteworthy, I've mentioned some, but we talk about how to market our programs. That's another area that we have that nutrition expertise, but in addition to not having communication expertise, we we kind of shy away from the whole area of marketing. And when we're trying to promote an idea, we're trying to promote a program, we might want to have people sign up for something, that's marketing. And we may feel kind of bashful about that, but it's an important skill to have. In fact, my blog this week that's on my website is about marketing, and I have a whole series of tip sheets that are free. You can download them, and the one that I most recently did was on 5 marketing principles, and they're ideas that we talk about in this book. We also talk in the book about how to do evaluation. I just talked about how it was important to be able to evaluate my students. Well, it's really important that we're evaluating the programs that we do, that we evaluate the success of our communication or other types of things that we're doing. And the book addresses that, talks about formative evaluation and summative evaluation and how to do those things. There's a chapter on grant writing, and I think a lot of times we're in a position, maybe we're not at an academic institution where we have a lot of support for creating grants, but we want to submit a grant for our public health program or for some community project that we have going on. Some very good advice for how to write that grant so that it's successful. We also have a chapter on how to write a book. Lots of people would love to think about writing a book, and that's the very last chapter in the book, is how to write a book. And that is written by Roberta Dife, who is definitely an expert on writing books. And she talks about traditional publishing versus self-publishing and a whole variety of things related to that. I don't see other questions. We've still got a few minutes. Those of you that might be former students know that I'm not usually at a lack for words, and it was really fun when I posted the little teaser on Wednesday that the majority of the comments that I got were from former students. And I'll just say that a real shout out to all of the graduates of Purdue's nutrition science program during the time that I was teaching. One of the things that was so affirming of what we did in our nutrition communication course was the feedback that we would get from these students when they were interns and then when they were out in the field, and how they were putting into practice what they had learned in that class. One of the things that I would often tell them when we would, say, for example, talk about media was that don't be surprised if you're not interviewed on your local TV station within a few years of graduating. And they'd all go, no, definitely not me. But yes, every year I would get emails from former students with links to their local TV station showing them being interviewed. And that is so important that we are willing and equipped to say yes when the media calls. Because if we say no, someone else will take our place, someone who's less qualified. And we need to be the nutrition expert and the communication expert. So I encourage you to believe in your ability to get more proficient at your communication skills. It is not something you're born with. We all have the capability of being better communicators. And it pays off in every area of your life. And even if you're homebound over the next weeks or months, we have these kinds of channels like Facebook Live and the internet to disseminate information that never before existed. So learn how to use those channels. Learn how to access them. If this old dog can learn some new tricks, so can you. And so build your skills, because you'll be better off, your audiences will be better off, and our entire profession will be better off because we have the message that people need. So don't be afraid to give it. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak. It's been my pleasure doing this Facebook Live, and if you have additional questions that you think of later, don't hesitate to reach out. And please contact me via my website. You can email me, barb@nutritioncommunicator.com. I'd love to hear from you. And take care during these troubled times. Be a voice of reason and patience and hope, and be safe.